Luke Paperwork. Hartman had a name that was completely normal by human standards, but to most species on the Galactic Council, it was a bit of a puzzle. After all, these were beings who preferred names like Grand Executor of the Seventh Nebula, or She Who Enthusiastically Processes Form 27B. To the galactic community, Luke's name was just one of many things that made humanity seem adorably simplistic. But despite the strange looks and occasional chuckles, Luke didn't mind working in the Galactic Council's Department of Bureaucratic Oversight and unnecessarily complicated procedures. He was good at it. Really good. The kind of good that should have won him respect, promotions, and maybe even a thanks for saving the star system once in a while. But instead of recognition, Luke got head pats. So many head pats. "Oh, look at the little human organizing all those papers," High Counselor Grack would say, their gelatinous appendage making that familiar squelching sound as it patted Luke's head. They try so hard with their tiny brains. Absolutely adorable. Luke would force a smile, the same one he'd mastered over the past 3 years working here, the kind of smile that silently screamed, "I'm not picturing you as a puddle of expired jello at all," while he efficiently processed the 17 different forms required to avert an intergalactic disaster. "You know, High Counselor," Luke said, adjusting a stack of paperwork that had the potential to stop the heat death of the universe if filed correctly, "humans have been running complex bureaucracies for thousands of years." "Yes, yes," Grack responded dismissively, their translucent body rippling with amusement that only their species could understand. "Like your little attempt at democracy. So cute how you try to organize things, almost as adorable as your species' belief that you invented anxiety. We all know that true civilization-destroying anxiety didn't truly exist until the Zelrathi came up with their first middle management structure." Luke's eye twitched. Just the previous week, he'd secretly averted the collapse of 3 major trade routes, fixed a computational glitch that would have caused the galactic stock market to crash, and created a filing system that reduced processing times by 47%. Not that anyone noticed. They were too busy gawking at his primitive paperclips. "Did you see that?" A fellow counselor, who resembled a hybrid of a peacock and a filing cabinet, whispered to Grack. "The human brought a packed lunch today. They still need regular meals, not like us, who photosynthesize like civilized beings. Truly remarkable." Grack squelched in approval. "And they still use that ancient bean juice for energy. What was it called again? Kafifi? Coffee?" "It's coffee," Luke corrected, his grip tightening around his mug that proudly proclaimed, "World's okayest bureaucrat." "And it's not ancient. It's a classic." Of course, of course." Grack patted his head once more, leaving behind a residue that would take hours to scrub off. "Don't get too worked up. We all remember when humans discovered they could create little pictures with punctuation marks. What do you call them? Emoji ancestors? Emoticons?" Luke muttered under his breath, contemplating whether it was worth mentioning that humans had developed AI that could process paperwork faster than the current system. But no, every time he had brought up human technological achievements, the council would spend hours debating whether humans were ready to learn about staplers. The fact that Luke had been using one the entire time somehow went unnoticed. Later that afternoon, after wrapping up an emergency request that would prevent multiple suns from going supernova due to expired permits, Grack floated by his desk once more. "Look at that!" Grack exclaimed dramatically to their entourage. "Humans are using computers now, from abacuses to this. Should we show them how to turn it on?" Luke's computer hummed softly as it processed complex algorithms to manage the entire galactic transportation network. He smiled that same special smile again. "You know what?" Luke said pleasantly, standing up. "I think it's time to make a few calls." It was time for a meeting, a very special one with specific humans about being just a bit too nice. The days of humanity being the galaxy's adorable underdogs were numbered. The era of humans being terrifyingly efficient was about to begin, and it would start with a simple thing: paperwork filed in triplicate. Part 2, the emergency meeting of humans in galactic service, took place in Conference Room C, though everyone knew it was really just the conference room closet. This was the only meeting space the council thought humans needed, given their adorably compact size. The fact that humans had figured out how to dimensionally expand the room using technology they were supposedly too primitive to comprehend? That was conveniently never mentioned. "Order! Order!" Luke called out to the humans who were all sitting in chairs clearly not designed for species with only 2 legs. "I now declare the first meeting of the committee to stop being nice, or Operation We're Not Cute, damn it." "Commander Chloe," that's what she said. Walters, head of the human contingent in the Galactic Defense Force, raised her hand. She earned her nickname after months of cracking the same joke every time an alien mentioned their impressive tentacles or massive processing capacity. The aliens still hadn't figured out why humans kept snickering. "Point of order," she said, trying not to slide off a chair built for creatures with at least 3 extra legs. "Are we sure about the operation name? It doesn't sound very professional." "Neither is being patted on the head while saving the galaxy from a quantum apocalypse," Luke replied, flipping through his papers with deliberate precision. "But point taken. We'll workshop the name." Dr. Owen, actually Griffith, chief human scientist in the xenobiology department, cleared his throat. He had earned his nickname by starting every sentence with "actually" whenever dealing with alien scientists. Owen, the one who still assumed humans thought the world was flat, continued to miss the fact that humans had already mapped most of the galaxy. But true to form, he began, "Actually," because of course he had to. "I've compiled some new data. Did you know that humans process 73% of all critical paperwork in the Council? Or that their primitive pattern recognition skills have prevented 142 diplomatic incidents just this year? Or that we know?" "We know, Owen," Luke interrupted, cutting him off. "That's why we're here. The real question is, what are we going to do about it?" "We could always just stop working," suggested Reed from maintenance, who had somehow prevented 3 space station core meltdowns this week by hitting things with a wrench at exactly the right moment. "No," Luke said, shaking his head. "We're not going to stop working. We're going to work exactly as we're supposed to the letter. We're going to follow every rule, every regulation, and every procedure precisely. No shortcuts, no fixing things on the fly, no preventing disasters before they happen." A collective gasp filled the room. Everyone knew that if humans followed the Council's procedures exactly as written, the entire galaxy would grind to a halt in a matter of days. "You mean—" Commander Walters leaned forward, nearly falling off her chair in the process. "Malicious compliance?" "Exactly," Luke said with a smile. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had been patted on the head one too many times, and who now had access to every single regulation ever written. "We're going to be perfect employees. We'll follow every single rule, regulation, and procedure to the T. No more shortcuts. No more fixing things behind the scenes. No more preventing disasters before they occur." "But what about the coffee supply?" someone asked, sounding worried. Humans had been secretly keeping the galactic economy running on caffeine for years. The aliens thought it was just a quaint human addiction, not realizing it was the fuel that powered the entire galactic system. "Oh, we'll still drink coffee," Luke assured them, his voice calm. "We'll just stop sharing it. Let's see how the Council likes their paperwork processed at normal, non-caffeinated speeds." Dr. Griffith raised his hand again. "Actually," he began, "I've been working on something that might help. You know how they think our facial expressions are adorably simplistic? Well, I've been practicing what I call the disappointed parent's face." He demonstrated. The room full of hardened space veterans all felt a sudden urge to apologize for something. "Perfect," Luke said, nodding. "We'll need that. Now, let's talk strategy. Commander Walters, how long do you think it would take to organize a galaxy-wide work-to-rule campaign?" "About 3 days if we use the proper channels," Walters replied automatically, then blushed. "Sorry, force of habit." 2 weeks if we follow all official procedures exactly," she added with a sigh. Part 3. The first real sign that things were going terribly, terribly wrong in the Galactic Council came when High Counselor Grack tried to get their morning reports processed. "What do you mean it will take 3 weeks? Grack's gelatinous form quivered in distress. "It usually takes 3 minutes. "Oh, we're so sorry," Luke said, his face a perfect mask of helpful concern. "But according to Regulation 7249B, subsection Q, Paragraph 3, line 247. All morning reports must be submitted in triplicate, with each copy authenticated by 3 different departments, processed through the Central Document Verification System, and checked for quantum entanglement with any parallel universe paperwork. But, Grack sputtered, that's ridiculous. Nobody follows those rules. Nobody followed those rules, Luke corrected gently. But we humans have been thinking about how we can become better employees, more evolved. So, we're making sure to follow every regulation exactly as written. We wouldn't want to disappoint you with our primitive shortcuts. Grack made a sound that could only be described as a jello mold experiencing an existential crisis. Meanwhile, similar scenes were unfolding across the galaxy. In the Galactic Defense Force, Commander Walters was carefully explaining why every single space maneuver now required 16 different permission forms. "But there's an alien invasion fleet approaching," the Admiral squealed, all 7 of their eyes bulging. "Yes, and we're very concerned about that," Commander Walters nodded sympathetically. "That's why we've already started processing the emergency response authorization forms. We should have approval by next Thursday, assuming no holidays in any of the participating star systems." "But they'll be here in an hour," the Admiral shouted, now visibly panicked. "Oh my!" Commander Walters put a hand to her chest in exaggerated concern. "That's very worrying. Unfortunately, according to Regulation 12,387X, responding to invasions in under 2 weeks is classified as reckless enthusiasm and requires additional paperwork." The invasion fleet, it turned out, took one look at the mountain of paperwork required to properly invade and decided to go home. In the science division, Dr. Griffith was having the time of his life. "Actually," he said to a room full of increasingly desperate alien scientists, "according to the official Scientific Method Procedures Manual, version 47.2, all experiments must be documented in interpretive dance before, during, and after the procedure." "But the star is about to go supernova," one of the scientists cried in panic. "I know," Dr. Griffith nodded gravely. "That's why I'm already working on my choreography. Would you like to see my first draft of Ode to Proper Laboratory Safety Protocols?" Somehow, the star decided not to go supernova. In maintenance, Reed had posted a 70-page checklist that had to be completed before anyone could use a wrench. The list included vital steps like contemplate the metaphysical implications of mechanical advantage and establish emotional rapport with the tool. Chaos spread exponentially. Simple tasks that humans used to handle in minutes were now taking weeks. Critical systems that humans had been maintaining for years began developing mysterious regulation-compliant issues. The entire galactic economy began to slow as humans, helpfully and cheerfully, followed every single rule ever written. Through it all, they kept up their helpful smiles and concerned expressions. Every time something went wrong because of a regulation, they'd shake their heads sadly and say things like, "It's a shame the procedure wasn't followed exactly, isn't it? If only there were a way to speed this up without breaking any rules. We understand this is frustrating," Grack hummed, their gelatinous form quivering with what might have been caffeine withdrawal. "But surely, more evolved species like yourselves can appreciate the importance of adhering to proper procedures." The final breaking point came when Grack tried to gain approval for altering the rules themselves. Luke, always ready to assist, provided them with Form 89C, application for permission to submit a request to discuss the possibility of reviewing future rule changes. "But this form references 16 other forms that don't even exist anymore," Grack protested in frustration. "Ah, dear," Luke said with mock concern, his smile hiding a quiet cackle. "You'll need to file Form 273Q, request for permission to acknowledge missing forms before we can proceed with that." Grack, now visibly deflated, weakly asked, "How did we even create all these regulations in the first place?" "That's an interesting question," Luke replied, pulling out a stack of paperwork the size of a small moon. "Would you like to file a formal inquiry into regulatory history? I happen to have all the necessary forms right here." Grack made a noise that could only be described as existential crisis in gelatinous form. Meanwhile, in a dimensionally expanded closet elsewhere in the council building, a group of humans raised their coffee cups in a silent, victorious toast. Phase 1 of their plan was complete. Phase 2, which would involve coffee, was about to turn things up a notch. Part 4. The first rule of psychological warfare is simple: identify the enemy's weaknesses. The second rule: exploit those weaknesses. The third rule: do all of this while looking perfectly innocent. Humans had mastered all three. The scheme began with a casual comment from Luke during a council meeting that had somehow stretched into its 14th hour thanks to the never-ending review of necessary procedural details. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Luke said, stifling a dramatic yawn. "I'm processing these forms a little slower than usual. I seem to have run out of coffee. You know how us primitive humans need our little energy drinks to function at peak efficiency." The council chamber fell dead silent. Suddenly, every alien species in the room remembered just how quickly humans used to process paperwork at seemingly impossible speeds. They also recalled how humans always had that mysterious brown liquid by their side during those feats of bureaucratic brilliance. "You need coffee to work faster?" Grak asked cautiously. "Oh, no need to worry," Luke replied with a smile. "I'm sure you superior species don't rely on chemical stimulants to maintain peak mental acuity for extended periods. We'll just have to accept that all council business will now proceed at normal, non-caffeinated human speeds." 3 hours later, the first underground coffee market emerged. Commander Walters reported that alien species were offering top-secret military technology in exchange for a single cup of espresso. Dr. Griffith had aliens begging to trade ancient scientific secrets for a sip of cappuccino. Even Reed, who didn't quite grasp what proper coffee was offered control of 3 star systems for what he called instant coffee, which in reality was just brown crayon water. The humans watched in barely contained amusement as the galaxy's mighty species spiraled into caffeine-induced chaos. "Is that High Counselor Grak trying to extract coffee molecules from Luke's empty mug?" Commander Walters asked during their daily secret meeting. "Yep," Luke said with a knowing nod, sipping from his hidden stash of premium dark roast. "They've even started a research project to synthesize coffee. Yesterday they managed to create a brown, liquid substance. Unfortunately, it achieved sentience and filed for citizen rights. The coffee shortage spread like a jittery wildfire across the galaxy. Alien civilizations that once scoffed at what they called primitive human beverages were now drafting legislation to classify coffee as a basic, fundamental right. Rumors swirled of a black market where a single coffee bean could purchase an entire moon. The humans, of course, had vast, secret coffee reserves hidden throughout the galaxy. They'd been preparing for this moment for years, squirreling away everything from simple drip coffee to the fabled triple-shot quantum mocha, which could keep a human awake for an entire week. "Should we tell them that coffee doesn't actually work on their biology?" Dr. Griffith asked during one meeting, observing through the window as a group of aliens performed what seemed to be a religious ritual around an empty Starbucks cup. "Actually," Luke started, then caught himself, grinning. "No, I don't think we will. Besides, the placebo effect seems to be working just fine." The situation reached its peak when Grak called an emergency council session. "Esteemed colleagues," Grak began, their gelatinous form vibrating with what could only be caffeine withdrawal. "It has come to our attention that human efficiency may be far more significant than we initially acknowledged. Perhaps we should reconsider our stance on their status within the Council." "Oh, we couldn't possibly accept any special treatment," Luke interrupted, donning his best humble, primitive expression. "After all, we're still learning how to be proper galactic citizens. Just yesterday, I had to file Form 624Z, Acknowledgement of Understanding that Humans are Still Learning Basic Concepts, like faster-than-light travel, which we definitely didn't invent centuries ago and keep under wraps because the paperwork to register it would take millennia." "But," Grak gurgled desperately, "we'll do anything. We'll fast-track your species recognition. We'll cancel all the redundant regulations. We'll stop patting you on the head. Just please, share your coffee." Luke, thoughtfully sipping from his "humans need coffee like plants need photosynthesis" mug, paused before responding. "Well," he said finally, "we might be able to work something out, but first, we'll need to file the proper paperwork, in triplicate, of course, and I'm afraid I'm all out of coffee at the moment." The sound of Grak's despairing squelch echoed across the council chambers. The humans, ever so calm, just smiled and took another sip of their contraband coffee. The galaxy was learning a very important lesson. Never, ever underestimate a species that runs on caffeine and spite. "Make it 3 weeks," Luke said with a smirk, raising his mug. "I want this done by then." The book was so by the book that the book itself filed a formal complaint about excessive ADHD. The meeting continued, with humans meticulously planning every aspect of their proper behavior. They rehearsed their expressions, perfecting the tone for saying things like, "Oh, we couldn't possibly bend that rule. It simply wouldn't be proper," with an air of earnest, helpful sincerity. And as they meticulously prepared, Luke couldn't suppress a grin. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what it meant to patronize a species that had turned passive aggressiveness into an art form. The revolution wouldn't be televised. No, it would be filed in triplicate, with every single form in order, every regulation adhered to, and it would be glorious. The realization that humans had secretly been running the galaxy didn't hit all at once. It came in waves, each more catastrophic than the last. The first wave struck when the central computer system, the one that aliens had assumed ran itself, flashed a message across the screen. "Error 404, human IT support not found. Have you tried following all 7,249 required procedures to turn it off and on again?" Wave 2 hit when the Galactic Defense Force made the shocking discovery that their fully automated defense grid was actually being maintained by Reed, who hit it with a wrench every Tuesday. Without his percussive maintenance, the entire defense system began playing Never Gonna Give You Up on an endless loop. Wave 3 came when the Council realized that humans had been managing 99.99% of all authentication codes, security protocols, and emergency procedures. The remaining 0.1%? Handled by a clever coffee machine that humans had trained to process basic forms. But the final, most devastating wave came when High Counselor Grack attempted to file their own paperwork. "I don't understand," Grack wailed, staring helplessly at a form that could have been written in an alien dialect, though as it happened, 3 humans in the linguistics department were fluent in it. "Where does my name go? Why are there 17 different date formats? What in the stars is a wet signature, and why does it require moisture content analysis?" "Oh dear," Luke said with a practiced, concerned parent expression. "Having trouble with basic form filing? How adorable. Let me just pat you on the head. Oh wait, that might be considered patronizing, wouldn't it?" The entire council chamber fell into a stunned silence. "You've been managing all this?" One council member whispered in disbelief. "All this time? Managing?" Luke raised a single eyebrow. "Oh no, we've just been following the proper procedures. Like when we prevented that cascade failure in the Galactic Core last week by filing Form 847X. Requisition for emergency prevention of really bad things in quintuplicate, complete with appendices and notarized quantum signatures." "That form doesn't exist!" Grack gasped. "Actually," Luke replied serenely, "it does. Humans wrote it along with about 80% of all the Council's procedures. We just made them so convoluted that everyone assumed they must have been created by a more advanced species." The revelation spread across the Council like wildfire. Humans hadn't just been processing the paperwork. They'd created it. They had designed the systems, written the procedures, and pretended to struggle with them while secretly keeping the entire galaxy running. Commander Walters casually mentioned that humans had also been handling all the simple military tasks, like preventing space-time paradoxes and ensuring dark matter didn't form a government. Dr. Griffith helpfully added that humans had been quietly correcting errors in alien scientific research, like the occasional violation of fundamental universal laws. Reed, meanwhile, just kept hitting things with his wrench. But now he did so while making direct, deliberate eye contact. The Council descended into chaos. Species that had spent centuries looking down on humans suddenly found themselves incapable of functioning without human help. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations discovered they couldn't file a lunch order without consulting a human. "How?" Grack asked weakly. "How did we not notice?" "Oh, that's simple," Luke said with a smirk, finally allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. "You were too busy patting us on the head to notice what our hands were doing. Now, Would anyone like to file a request for historical oversight recognition? Luke added, pulling out the necessary forms. I have them right here, all 947 pages in triplicate. The council chamber filled with the sound of various alien species scrambling to keep it together. And somewhere in the building, in a dimensionally expanded closet that was larger than most star systems, humans raised their coffee cups in another silent toast. The galaxy was finally learning that primitive didn't mean what they thought it meant, and the humans hadn't even revealed their final form yet. The Great Galactic Revelation, as it came to be known, ended not with a grand explosion, but with a perfectly filed, all-in-order whimper. High Counselor Grack, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council, and with noticeably fewer head pats than usual, made the official announcement. It has come to our attention that we may have, well, slightly underestimated our human colleagues, Grack announced, their gelatinous form wilting under the weight of this revelation. Luke sat in the front row, sipping his coffee with the unhurried satisfaction of someone who had just won a chess match that nobody else even knew they were playing. Furthermore, Grack continued, their tone practically dripping with regret, we wish to extend our sincere apologies for any condescension, head-patting, or assumptions about the evolutionary status of a species that, apparently, has figured out how to weaponize passive aggressiveness while the rest of us were still learning how to metabolize light. The humans in the audience maintained perfect poker faces, though some of them might have been smirking just a little too much. One could almost hear the unspoken message reverberating across the galaxy. Never underestimate the power of a species that has mastered the art of bureaucracy and can get you to fill out 947 forms just to change a light bulb. Luke muttered under his breath, "That's what she said," when Grack casually mentioned extending anything in recognition of humanity's absolutely essential, totally critical, undeniably vital role in galactic civilization. We hereby promote all humans to the highest level of council authority, effective immediately, Grack proclaimed, with an air of finality. Oh, we couldn't possibly accept such a responsibility. Luke stood up with exaggerated humility, his face a perfect study of concern. After all, we're still such a young species. Perhaps we should file a request for consideration of the implications of promotion? I believe it's only a few thousand pages long. The entire council chamber collectively cringed. Please, Grack whispered, no more forms. Luke pretended to deliberate for a moment. I suppose we could skip some of the paperwork just this once as a gesture of interspecies goodwill. The collective sigh of relief from the aliens was palpable, though Luke couldn't resist adding one final twist. However, you should probably know, Operation Passive Aggressive wasn't actually necessary. We could have just told you all this from the beginning. Then why go through all of this? Grack asked, genuinely perplexed. Because, Luke's smile widened, humans really enjoy a good dramatic reveal. Also, we had a betting pool on how long it would take for you to notice that the coffee machine in Section 7 has been running the entire department's quantum calculations for the past year. The coffee machine that achieved sentience last week? Grack asked, now visibly distressed. No, Luke corrected, shaking his head. That one's just making coffee. The sentient one? It's in charge of processing parking permits. And just like that, a new era of galactic cooperation began. Humans were finally recognized for their essential contributions, and alien species learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of patronizing behavior. The great coffee shortage was unanimously declared a topic to never, under any circumstances, be brought up again. The galaxy's bureaucracy was streamlined, though humans insisted on keeping just enough red tape to maintain their beloved level of administrative chaos. Head-patting was officially outlawed, except for certified therapy animals and adorably cute maintenance robots. As for Luke Paperwork Hartman, he kept his position in the Department of Bureaucratic Oversight, though his title was now officially changed to Supreme Manager of Getting Things Done while making it look incredibly difficult. Commander Walters, despite the years of making inappropriate jokes in meetings, continued with her signature style. But now aliens laughed along, some with a hint of confusion, others with full appreciation. Dr. Griffith still started every sentence with, "actually," but now it was seen as a mark of distinction rather than an idiosyncratic habit. Reed? Reed just kept hitting things with his wrench, because after all, some solutions are universal. The Council had learned that lesson well. The galaxy had finally learned its most important lesson. Never underestimate a species that thrives on caffeine, runs on spite, and has perfected passive-aggressive behavior into a form of high art. And should any new species join the Council and try to look down on humanity? Well, there was always a form for that. Filed in triplicate, of course. At the conclusion, though, the coffee machine responsible for processing parking permits submitted a postscript. This story has been filed incomplete due to insufficient dramatization of the key role sentient beverages play in galactic administration.